I call this meeting to order. This is a regular school board meeting in the Northfield Public Schools. It is Monday, August 26th, and we had a couple items in the table file.
Yes, in terms of items, we have in the table file a summary of the superintendent's evaluation that Chair Iverson will be presenting to the board a little later this evening. We also have a number of personnel items, including appointments, increase, decrease, change in assignment, also resignations, and a gift agreement.
Very good. If there's no objection, I will add these to the agenda as we move forward. All right. We are ready for public comment. And it looks like we do not have anyone here to address the board. So we will move on, although it's nice to see Jan there.
Yes, it is nice to see Jan.
Yeah. Welcome back. We are ready to move on to approval of the minutes. Board members, you have in your packets the minutes from the last school board meeting from August 12th. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Moved by Julie.
Second.
Seconded by Ann. Any discussion? All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. Announcements and recognition.
Okay, and we have two this evening. First of all, we had 78 incoming 7th graders had a very successful trip to Eagle Bluff last Wednesday through Friday, the 21st through the 23rd. The 3-day experience promoted learning that dovetails with classroom academic and social needs. Community Services would like to thank the following district staff and parent chaperones for assistance with the trip. Northfield School District staff included Amy Allen, Katrina Meehan, Candace Hard, Craig Johnson, and Jeff Peshta. And parent chaperones included Tara Bamonte Grebus, Kathy Carlson, Tui Molke, Eric Nelson, Sarah Nielsen, and Rob Nutt. And again, if you remember, this was a piece that we worked on through the spring, and I want to congratulate Community Services. I think they did an outstanding job of shepherding this through, and I think it was all smiles. The kids, I think, really enjoyed it, and we are looking now at open dates for next summer, so all well. Also, just an announcement which is a little different in that we were approached by an individual who was the former president of the Northfield Historical Society and Library Board, Bruce Cowell, and Cowell. Okay. And Bruce and I sat down and talked about the concept of doing a Minnesota Historical and Cultural Heritage Grant to do a history of the Northfield Public Schools. And they received a grant in the amount of $9,000 to actually do that history. And if you think about it, as a school district, we have in various bits and pieces and piles and folders around the district information about things going back to the 1800s. We've got some earlier work that had been done by folks trying to kind of talk about the various schools that were in place at various times prior to even the construction of anything that's still standing here in the city. And so Bruce has done this for a number of other groups, and so he will be doing this, and Earl Weinman will be acting as the project director. He'll be able to identify and collect and organize and catalog primary source documents and create a history of the Northfield Public Schools, and then also put that into a monograph that will summarize those findings. So he is hoping to complete that work in January of 2014. So an opportunity for us to do something we've talked about doing, but really didn't have the resource to do. And basically, again, these dollars are coming through the arts and environmental legacy piece that's part of that ongoing state support. So I think a good opportunity for us to get it done, and at really no cost to the district locally. And that's the announcements I have for this evening.
Board members, other announcements or recognition? No? All right. We are ready to move on for our first item for discussion, which is a review of the iPad distribution. So, Mr. Hillman.
Well, it's been a few months since we shared, an informal presentation with you, but Dr. Richardson and I felt, and this was before the sessions even started, that we thought we should share a review with you. And at that time, when we put it on the agenda, I was still very, 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 very nervous. And now we're very, very, very relieved and couldn't be more thrilled, actually, overall so far. So basically, we just want to kind of go back to Tech Boot Camp, because remember that the distribution sessions were just a part of this whole journey. And we are very pleased with Tech Boot Camp this summer. Remember, we changed the way that we operated from a week in service to not a week, W-E-A-K, but a week long in service, because it's always been a strong in service, to an every Tuesday. And so basically we did this over 10 weeks beginning June 11th and through August 13th. During that time, we had approximately 158 attendees. We had 59 sessions. We had 14 different instructors, all of whom are Northfield Public Schools teachers or technology staff or administration. So I was really happy to see that we continue to grow the number of our own instructors. We're growing our efficacy in this area, and we're able to teach ourselves, and we think that that's a huge piece, because I know, as entertaining as I am, the fact is that it's much better to learn from your colleagues than it is from an administrator. We know that that's quality staff development. So I thought you would be pleased with these numbers, and we certainly were. So let's talk about the distribution sessions. If you really think about it, we had approximately 25 distribution sessions in total when you go and count all the different pieces that we had. We actually started with we got this idea from another school district. We did a practice run, and we offered that to students of our faculty. We did that 2 days before the first big session, and we were very pleased that we did. We found a couple of different pieces that really we were able to tweak and made a significant difference. So we had 99 students attend that practice session, and it took us an hour and 15 minutes to get them through the whole process, the 30-minute orientation, the paying their bill, the distribution in the media center, etc. And the rest of the way, we didn't have a group that was there for more than an hour by choice. There were some people who hung around and visited a bit, but we didn't have any group other than that one that stayed an hour. So we're very pleased with that. Lots of options. We were very flexible. We initially told people that if you can't make your pre-assigned time, we try to group students at about groups of 100 to try to make it a reasonable flow, saying if you couldn't make your assigned time, come to any time thereafter. Dozens, if not scores of calls, just trying to be very flexible with folks in terms of my students got this on this date and this date, can I come before? Sure. And it all worked out in the end. So overall, I think if you were to ask people in general, they would say that it went smoothly. I think Dr. Richardson has said similar kinds of pieces. And if you see the picture behind here, Dr. Richardson spent about 14 hours here, as well as Aaron Mayberry, Marnie. We had a lot of school staff who were here. Julie Pritchard helped out, putting cases on.
We have the broken fingernails.
Yes,
and
finally
pinch fingers to prove it.
Someone took ibuprofen yesterday because their fingers were still hurting, but that's okay. So we really felt they went very well overall. We do have 3 meeting sessions tomorrow afternoon and evening of 4 p.m., 5 p.m., and 6 p.m. at Northfield Middle School. That is for all 6th through 12th grade students who have not had a chance to come yet. And so that's a mix and match group, but we're holding it at the middle school. And one of the things that I'm really pleased about, and Aaron Mayberry was such a great partner in this, along with the Torch group, there were some additional efforts into making sure that our Spanish-speaking families had an opportunity to hear it in their native language. And so Torch actually sponsored a meal beforehand at both the middle school and high school. And I believe that if I remember correctly, at the middle school session, we had 39 students represented with their families. And at the high school session, I think it was nearly 51. So we were very pleased with the turnout. And a number of other Spanish-speaking families came to the regular sessions, but we were very pleased with that turnout in terms of the way that it was marketed. And actually, Aaron had people go door to door in some of our more primarily Spanish-speaking neighborhoods with handouts and postcards. So we felt really good to make sure that the word got out. We know that from our research, we know in our Spanish-speaking community, when they get a piece of paper from the school now, that they take that very seriously. And so we really thought that we leveraged some of the things that we learned from some of Hannah Puchko's surveys in the past, and we're very pleased at how we got lots of people. We have distributed, I think, 1928 iPads to date. and we've got about 300 more to go, and we're even having a session on the first day of school for sophomores, juniors, and seniors who haven't been able to come to anything else. As you know, they don't show up to school until about noon that day, so we're going to have a 10:30 session that Mr. Lear announced today. So that's, we're not leaving a stone unturned, is how we feel. So some of you came to the sessions to pick up an iPad or two, and I hope that you felt that it was a useful orientation. We balanced the meat of the orientation with the amount of time that parents were willing to sit. And so I think that by and large, I would consider it very successful. And that's after a lot of wording. So just I want to give you an update on the insurance, because if you remember, we did a lot of discussion about how we would do the insurance. And just to remind you, we're doing a self-funded insurance strategy where students who pay full price for lunch, we're paying $25. Students who pay reduced price for lunch, $20. $15 for students who are paying free lunch, and then a $100 cap. And I actually did visit with a couple of families who took advantage of the $100 cap, and they were very thankful. We've, according to Val Murdersdorf, we've collected about $52,500 so far. That's approximate. And the finance office just really stepped up, and they took over the cashiering of the events, and we really pushed the paying online beforehand, and many people took advantage of that. And an unintended consequence is now all those people have already set up their new eFunds for Schools account so they can put lunch money in with this new credit card vendor. So very well so far with that. Right now we have enough to replace in totality 210 iPads, and if you remember, that's just about what we predicted. It's just under 10% of our entire total. And when we look at other schools, no one has come close to having to replace that percentage. And just to be real clear, I had a couple of questions from some folks there about how we were going to make sure that this fund was transparent. And so we do have this isolated in a separate line item in the budget, and we need to be very clear, it's only going to be used for iPad repairs. And so we'll give you a report every so often. It's just like our health insurance in terms of that piece. We'll let you know where we're at with that. One of the things that really turned out to be it was not intentionally smart, but it turned out to be smart. We were a little concerned about distributing the devices a couple of weeks ahead of school, and that really came as a result of the high school and middle school really wanting to distribute their schedules only through family access. And so we did the dates earlier than we initially had thought. And I think something that really has come well from that is the fact that we have been able to identify a handful of early issues, things that are not a big deal because it's a week or 2 weeks before school starts. That would have been a much bigger deal. I'll give you one example. We have worked very closely with the public library. I've been to the public library a couple of times to do some training for the reference librarians, who are fantastic, by the way. And then we had some reports that students went to the public library and couldn't get on their Wi-Fi, and that was a little concerning. So we went down there and found out that their Southeast Regional Library had some kind of technical thing that were preventing our students from joining it. Within a couple of hours, our people and their people got together and it was resolved. Now, had that been the first week of school, it would have been a much bigger deal. We also found we put a lot of forethought into how the entire system works together so that it can support all of these devices. And we were a little concerned the first couple of nights watching as kids are using this stuff, and we can tell you it's significant. We're showing that we've done enough planning where we believe we've got plenty of room. But we saw some things that concerned us, and our network manager, Nate Knudsen, made some tweaks and did a few things, and now we're watching everybody go full speed ahead, and that's really exciting to see. So there will be more things like that. These are just, because every time we clear one hurdle, there's another one standing right in front of us. But so far, we've been able to clear those hurdles with, I would say, not too much trouble. There will be trouble, we're sure of it, just when does it come? But the early lessons have been, I think, very positive. We fielded a lot of phone calls with various questions, and it's been enjoyable to interact with parents and with students calling it, leaving messages at 7:30 at night. They're excited about it, and that's really good. So those are our early lessons, and now it's on to the real work. All of this has been an interesting venture in logistics, but it all is about getting to the point of actually teaching and learning. And so we are excited as we start to go on this journey. We want to remind people that this year we're focused on substitution in the SAMR model. There will be people who go all the way to redefinition within the first couple of weeks of school, but it's not a light switch. We had some people who felt, all of the textbooks will be digital this year. And as you know, you've listened to me a few times here, it's not a light switch. We're not flipping it all on right away, but we have more than what I thought we would. And there are other things that we're working through to digitize curriculum in different ways, but we are focused on that substitution part, and we're excited to see the challenges that are ahead of us. So we thought we'd share with you just a brief overview of how things went, and certainly would stand for any questions you might have.
Board members, questions? Julie?
I don't think you can absolutely say enough about how that distribution process went. It was amazing. It was
Thank you.
so well done, and all of the people that stepped up to volunteer, staff throughout the district as well as administrators, it was just amazing. And the excitement in the room was just really fun to see. And the parents that wanted to carry the iPad from the auditorium to the library so that they wouldn't drop it before they got the case on. And then the Instagram messages that are going out with the kids when they were told they could decorate the cases with stickers so that they could identify them. And that they're taking that very seriously. Like, this is this is saying something about myself, so they're thinking about the stickers that they actually want and the duct tape they want. And it's just amazing, the personal ownership that they took immediately. I had one quick question. Have you heard from anyone who's concerned about Wi-Fi access for them personally, whether or not they can't access the library, if they're able to work something out with Northfield Wi-Fi? Has there been anyone finding that difficult?
You know, as you know, for those of you who have attended the community meetings in the 18 months that we were working on this, that is something that's come up all the time. And so I was very concerned, I lost sleep over the public library thing, because that has been a hallmark of our piece, and that's been resolved, so there's not an issue there. I did work with one family, several families who said, okay, so I don't have Wi-Fi at home, how can I make this work? And we talked with them about how their student, we don't lie, we say it's better with internet, there's no question about it, but as a student, what you're going to have to do is you're going to just have to be more judicious in terms of knowing what you need to take home with you. So you're going to need to make sure that you download, some of the pieces into an application like Notability or into iBooks. You're going to need to know that you're going to use something offline, potentially to do some of your writing, and then when you get back on the network, you can plug it into Schoology or one of the other online systems that we have. And I think that that's teaching students who are in that situation to use the tools that they have available. They're really beginning to almost a self-advocacy kind of thing in terms of making sure that they understand what they have available. And you've heard my analogy before that the Hillmans growing up didn't have the Encyclopedia Britannica, but the Fessmeyers did. And what we learned is we learned how to deal with that. And this is this generation's piece of that. Several of the parents that we talked with, I think, was a matter of them determining what was the appropriate provider to go with. I reminded people of the CenturyLink and the charter deals where if you can prove certain financial circumstances where you can get a very low cost, $9.99 a month internet connection. But we've not, from the beginning, I think we've been more than transparent with that the devices are better when they're on the web. But at the same time, students who don't have access to that, we're going to help them through things. We're going to try to help them understand what do they need to do to make it work. And I think there's going to be some quality learning that happens from that as well. And some of it isn't even just a poverty issue. Some of it is geographic. In fact, I would even venture to say more of it is geographic in terms of where I live, in terms of whether I have a quality signal or not. And so we've worked with a handful of people on that, and only a few so far. I know there are more out there, but only a few so far.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to, I could talk all night about the volunteers, but our media specialists, Amy Steve and Rebecca Glazing and those folks, we had to call an audible about 2 weeks before the distributions. We had not planned on touching the devices beforehand. We had planned to have the students configure them themselves. We had a strategy. And then just talking with a couple of other schools, we heard mixed success. So about 2 weeks before our distributions, I informed our tech staff that they had to open and configure 2,200 iPads. And you know what? They did it.
Have a nice day.
Without a question. And so proud of our team overall in terms of how and most of our people are doing things that people will never know about. And they're doing some of their best work ever, and no one will ever hear about it. So we're very proud of them. Dozens of teachers who volunteered their time to come and help with cases. We're just excited to see the smiles on kids' faces. So it was a real team effort with lots of people being involved, and it was amazing. It was a lot of fun. Any other questions?
Well, I guess I would like to say, having had 2 students that went through it, I also was really, really impressed with the
Joel's part of it, because we did it at the high school, and the organization of all the volunteers. And I think, you know, how intentional it was about doing it so many weeks out, I think that was just brilliant. I mean, the excitement at our house every day is tremendous. And I think the point that Julie makes is well made about the Wi-Fi, but I think one thing that I was thinking about is that we've been moving more and more to having students use the internet with Google Drive with their papers.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I think that this, you know, brings it to the forefront that this is what's been happening, so there's more awareness and more awareness for the community of being able to support that. So I think that can only be good. So thank you so much.
It's been a labor of love, a lot of fun. Thank you very much.
All right, now we are ready for Dr. Richardson and the state of the district. So board members, you should have in your packet both PowerPoints and a bulleted list.
All right, tonight we'd like to do something that has kind of become a tradition for our district in terms of sharing celebrations and challenges. Looking back at the previous year, looking forward at the next year in terms of the things that we're going to need to address as we continue to move forward. What I'd like to do tonight then is to go through and take a look at a number of different areas, and we've done this fairly arbitrarily in terms of trying to break this into pieces, but I think it's important for you to have it so you have a sense of the variety and kinds and depth of things that have been done. The other thing I know that several board members have told me over the years has been, this is a really handy piece or document to have, because really on two sides of one sheet of paper, you have pretty much the core celebrations, the things that we've been able to get done, and on another sheet of paper, the challenges that we face. And so hopefully this will give you that kind of information, and when I get done, please feel free to ask questions, or even if there's a question that comes to you midstream and you want to stop the continuous presentation, I would be happy to answer those questions as we go. Okay, we're going to start with looking back at 2012-13 and thinking about the kinds of things that have been involved. And obviously the first of those really is looking at community engagement strategies and the number of strategies that we use in terms of thinking about the potential impact of modified calendars, looking at the concept of achievement gap, looking at the concept of summer slide. We had a chance to try a number of different things out, webinar strategy, looking at conversation strategies, looking at a variety of different ways to blog and share information about the work and the thought we had in terms of those two core issues. And I think we saw some really positive things come from that. We saw some other pieces where it appears that that maybe the community is not really at the point where a significant number of people make use of certain pieces. But I think having a chance to try all of them out and having a chance for Griff to work with us in terms of someone that is doing this as a professional endeavor, it really helped us to really take a look at different ways that we can work that process. I think that as a board, another core issue is obviously the support of students and staff accomplishments and PLCs and school improvement plans. And as a board, again, as you always have done, you've been gracious in terms of being involved in the monthly PLC presentations where we share information about various PLCs and the work that they're doing. Looking at the months of October, November, and early December, when we're sharing with you the school improvement plans and really looking at the progress that's been made by each individual building and the goals that they have moving forward. Again, I think that's extremely important, and it's really positive, I think, for our staff members who come in front of you to share those things, to have that opportunity and to get your response, your questions, and your support in terms of the work they're doing. You also have some duties that are just part of the duties that school boards have. School board policies is one of those pieces. Again, we're not exactly in autopilot mode, but we are in a mode where we're doing just individual policies as they come up and really trying to address and work and update those. Most of those to this point have been fairly minor in this last year, and we've been able to address those typically with just a review and update within one session. We've also asked again about the district strategic plan. And again, this may be something that the board again is ready to talk about. But this year, again, the decision in 2012-13 was to maintain the district strategic plan. I think the key thing, and probably the longevity of this plan, because if you really think about it, 9 years is a long time for a district to have a strategic plan in place. But I think we were very deliberate in terms of the development of that plan, that we really kept it at the 30,000 foot level, that we kept the mission very broad, that we kept the beliefs very strong and very clear, and that the strategies were ones that would reach out and go into the future. Again, that may be something that we're ready to come back and take a look at. That is something really the board needs to make that decision when they're ready to have that happen. And then we'll work with a process that will draw in not only the board, but community members and staff to work with it. We've also been very fortunate again. This is, again, 9 years going in with the DPAC goals. And again, that particular group probably continues to exceed my expectations in terms of focus and direction and commitment, in terms of a group of staff and community members who are sitting down and really taking hard looks at our curriculum instruction, our student services, and looking at our assessment strategies going forward. And I think I've really provided this again with some good annual benchmarks in terms of programmatic pieces. Really, if you think about it, a lot of the technology pieces around RTI, a number of the other big pieces with PLCs and with improvement plans have all flowed from the DPAC goals. And then finally, we're continuing to work with the charter school evaluation for Arcadia and Prairie Creek, and remember that those are at a much higher level than they have been in the past in terms of at least one full day evaluation, where I spend from typically 7:30 in the morning to 4:30 in the afternoon meeting with kids, with staff, with parents, with the board from the charter, and really taking a hard look at how the charters are operating. And then I think, as you've seen over the last years, a real strengthening of the level of their annual reports and their improvement plans. In terms of teaching and learning and curriculum instruction in Title II, obviously the major piece that happened in this last year was the implementation of the new Director of Teaching and Learning position. And we're very pleased and proud to have Mary Hansen be on board in that role in terms of curriculum instruction, the oversight of the DCSDC, and also the initial implementation of RTI in close effort with Gary Lewis. Obviously, during this last year, we implemented response to intervention and the RTI coach strategy, again supported by Accelerate Northfield as a strategy for supporting and providing the extra volunteer help that we needed. Both of those pieces have, I think, exceeded our wildest expectations in terms of the commitment and direction of those RTI coaches, their willingness to dig in to help us develop the interventions, to really work with individual PLCs, to do the problem-solving process that needs to occur, and to really work to make sure that the interventions that are implemented with integrity and evaluated. We also began to see the middle school systematic intervention, especially in terms of the study hall strategy that's being used, which again, we hope to see that increase as we go forward, with the idea that during the day, students actually are identified who need support in particular areas, and then are able to address those areas with teachers who are available during that study hall block. We're continuing to work with the 9th grade academy. That has still been one of the strongest things that we've been able to get done at the high school level, along with the 10th grade seminar, and really have given us the continuing effort of significantly reducing the number of classes failed at the 9th grade level, and really increasing the number of credits that kids are getting. We know both of those things are having a huge impact in terms of the overall graduation rate. And if you think about it, our graduation rate this year is 96.4%. which is pretty impressive. And again, in last year, again, almost all of our Latino students graduated on time. We also have seen expanded cognitive coaching. We're continuing to expand that process to bring more individuals into the cognitive coaching role. What we're really finding with that is the power of having people really understand the concept of how do you coach someone through a decision and basically a problem-solving process, so that they really discover it and work through it themselves, and you provide support as opposed to you giving them the answer. And knowing that, just like the difference between giving a person a fish versus teaching a person to fish, when you move that coaching model and do it correctly, it has a real power in terms of changing the way that teacher or individual interacts with their students and other adults. We also looked at common planning, instruction, flexible grouping, interventions, and collaboration. As you know, that's become a hallmark at the elementary level in terms of the flexible grouping being the strategy that really drives the ability for the PLCs, before they make decisions about students who need to be involved in an intervention, giving them the opportunity to have an experienced instruction at a variety of levels to meet their needs. And we know that by doing that, oftentimes we're able to address their needs without having to do an intervention, but it also very quickly identifies or helps us to identify students that need to go farther. We also continue to use cluster grouping and differentiation, but very much tied now into the flexible grouping, so that it's pretty much a very smooth combination of those ingredients as opposed to that being set out as a separate item. We've continued to look at with Bridges to K, the 6th grade web, and the 9th grade link crew program. Again, the Bridges to K, hopefully some of you were able to attend the open house for Bridges to K that we held this last week, right? An opportunity to get in and see what's happening, and the fact that really, as those kids now are coming into their kindergarten program, they've had 3 weeks of an opportunity to go through and really experience life as a kindergartner. And oftentimes for students that maybe have not had those experiences of being in a structured environment, not having those experiences of how to line up, how to go to lunch, doing all those things, we just know that we put kids in a better place. And beyond that, really beginning to help them see what are some of the kind of the normal routines that occur in the kindergarten classroom. We're at the point now where we're beginning to attract attention from other school districts. Erin has, I think, received recently a request from Farmington, basically saying, how are you doing this and how are you doing it for the price? And we've talked a lot again about the strategies that we've used and the approaches we've used to make that happen, but it's become a very powerful program. We've also looked at the modified compañeros and ESL programs, and again, it moved last year through the new 3rd grade Spanish literacy. Remember, we're moving through that process with 1 new class each year until we get 5th grade done. At the same time, we're also working at the programming for the middle school Spanish program, so that we really make a better and more secure link between the programming that's occurring at the elementary and the programming occurring in middle school. We also, Mary in her spare time works on the curriculum review cycle and the curriculum training for staff. And again, every year in that process, we're moving through that effort. Remember that we look at a 7-year cycle. And so every year there's a new subject area or subject areas that is up for review and revision, looking at additional resources, looking at when do we begin moving to tech resources as opposed to traditional book resources, looking at what the new standards are in a particular area, and really making sure then that we also give the teachers the training they need to be able to make that happen. And that training occurring not only during pre-service week, but also during the school year. And then finally, continuing to work with online and blended programming at the high school, with looking at how we can address the needs of students that may have difficulty being able to get all the classes in that they want to get in, and being able to provide some opportunities to do things online or in a blended fashion. In terms of teaching learning, the other core component is assessment and accountability. And again, here we're working on expanded universal screening, progress monitoring, and implementation of RTI services. Last year, we did that through a process where during the first month or so of school, we really worked through the process of doing nibble screening and other kinds of screening strategies with our students, really getting a handle on how that was going to work and how we could use that data to really look at levels of instruction for the students. Obviously, this year we're going to move a little more direct approach actually before school starts. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. We also looked at making sure that this last year that we did the RTI implementation planning process. And as part of that process, the decision to look at PBIS as a core strategy in terms of positive behavior intervention, and getting the training started in that, which part of it was done during the summer, part of it will be held in the fall, part will be held in the spring. But the idea being that we have trained teams at the high school, at the middle school, and at the alternative learning center, area learning center, so that all three of those groups have the skill set and some specific strategies to actually implement the secondary RTI plan. We also continued with PLC presentations, evidence of practice. Again, Mary, I think, really worked with the PLCs to really ramp up the quality of the EOPs, or evidence of practice documentation. All of those are now out on the web, both for the first semester and second semester of this past year. And I think we're going to continue to build on those, because we really do believe those have the ability to kind of describe how each PLC is doing, what activities they were involved in, what their SMART goal was, and what results they've had. And then finally, looking at continuous improvement and staff development. As I shared with our new teachers coming in this fall, we really talk about this being a continuous improvement district. We're not in a situation where we're doing something and then we pronounce it done and sit back on our laurels. We're continuing to try to improve the quality of our instructional program, and to do that, we know we've got to continue to look at how to make it better, and we've also got to think about how we can develop staff so we can do that. We also had to address some initial new state accountability designations. We had the new Read Well by third grade, which we had put the documentation and plan together for that this last year, to get that basically out on the website, information shared with the Department of Education that provided us some additional funding to support that. But it also gave us the opportunity to really think about what are all the assessment strategies that we're currently using to help prepare us, even as we think about kindergartners and first graders and second graders before they begin to take MCA tests and other kind of testing, so that we really have a good idea of how they're progressing. And then finally, we're looking at district assessment coordination and computers for assessment. And as you know, that's going to continue to ramp up. This last year was the last year we're going to be able to do a paper and pencil reading test. We made a conscious decision to do that because we felt that having a new test with new standards and new expectations at the same time, we put the students into a situation of having to do it online, was not a wise decision. It turned out not only to be not a wise decision for that reason, it was also a wise decision because there were a number of initial computer glitches. And so we avoided those pieces by doing it paper and pencil. We will not have that opportunity for this coming year or in the future, as state statute will require us to provide all testing will be computer adapted testing going forward. And so we feel we've given ourselves an opportunity to do all the things we could, but knowing that this is going to be an important piece, and it's going to be a piece that will continue to increase the impact on the computer labs and other pieces until we hopefully get an approach where iPads can be the strategy that students can take these kinds of assessments just like they are for everything else we do. In terms of celebrations as far as student services, and remember for this previous year, 2012-13. That includes special education, Title I, Title III, English language learners, and also crisis intervention. So what were the things we looked at there? Obviously, we planned for a new shared special education director position, a significant departure from what we've done in the past, where we had our own special ed director, student services director for our district. Looking at how that was going to move forward, could we make that happen with Faribault? What would it need to look like in order for that to be successful? We need to address the increased number of students that continue to come to us with significant special education needs. We've done that with the implementation of several county-wide programs that have been very, very successful, including the SUN program, the STEP program, and the Level 4 EBD programs that are run in cooperation with Faribault Public Schools through a Joint Powers Agreement, giving us the ability to really support almost all of our student needs, regardless of how significant, without having to send students to the Twin Cities or somewhere else at a much higher cost. We also looked at self-monitoring as a part of the continuous improvement monitoring process called SIMP. I mistakenly called it CHIMP the other day, and Barry made sure that I informed me, no, that was not correct. SIMP. And again, it's the concept of really taking a look at the district monitoring how we're doing special education, what that approach looks like, trying to make sure that we have all the elements in place that need to be there. We also need to work with district restricted procedures policy. The restricted procedures is all about physical restraint for kids. That's been an ongoing battle with the legislature between individuals that are saying there can be no restraint for any reason whatsoever, versus individuals saying there are times when, in order to protect the student or other students within the classroom, we have to provide appropriate restraints, and we need to know how to do it when we do that. And again, we've been working with that policy, trying to address it as it's been a moving target. We also continue to do student services handbook updates, which will prepare us for this next year when we'll talk about doing the shared handbook. We also continue with staff training for special education. We actually implemented all the ESL, WIDA standards, and WIDA access testing, which again, makes sure that we're really addressing and meeting the needs of our ESL students. Our ALC program continues to be, I think, a model for many other districts across the state. We really have grown that program in terms of graduation, and many of you as board members have sat in with graduation and listened to the stories of kids as they move through that process. We've also greatly expanded the Targeted Services program, which we actually talked quite a bit about as we were looking at the concepts of summer slide and achievement gaps. So those dollars, again, only are in place because we have a strong ALC program, which allows us to do the summer programming and as well as the during the year plus programming at elementary and middle school. And then finally, we continue to update the crisis intervention plan, and especially again moving forward as we addressed and had to experience the issues around Sandy Hook. In terms of community services, some really positive things have happened with community services during 2012-13. First of all, we implemented the early childhood new revised program in terms of bringing all those components together that Hannah and Aaron had worked on over the course of time. Actually all came to fruition with Sarah Lyon heading up that part of the community services program. They also worked diligently to get their 4-star parent aware rating, which gives us the ability, when funding begins to flow from the state, to support individuals who are in need and are not able otherwise to access early childhood programming. We have a program now that they can enroll in, and the dollars from that program can be used because we have that parent aware rating. They also supported planning for the community collective impact, and Aaron and Zach and others went all over the community talking to a number of different groups about the concept of community impact and Northfield Promise, and really got that
to the point where it was ready to be rolled out in the spring of last year, and I think is really on the verge of taking off. And the wonderful thing is that the timing is just about right, because we're hitting a point where we're really talking about career college readiness, and we're talking about how can that happen, and how can it happen in the community, and this really, with the focus of cradle to career, I think will be a perfect mesh. Also, and again, I've thanked Aaron before, but obviously Aaron's major leadership in terms of planning the ELC summer trip transition. We went from really struggling with how are we going to make this thing work? Does it work with the number of kids we have? Is this really the right model? Is it at the right time? And seeing again almost 80 students participating in the summer trip and having it work out very, very smoothly with all the right people on the bus, literally and figuratively, to really make this happen. And again, I think have made that transition a smooth one, which otherwise might not have been, but I think again, the collaborative efforts, the meeting with community, other pieces that we did to bring that to fruition really made a difference. I think you've seen community services continue to expand their marketing efforts, enhance registration, facility scheduling, and access, really looking at all the different ways we can really draw community into programming that we provide. And finally, a big part of what community services does every year, and that's really get out there and secure funding. And again, looking at United Way and Wings, and help me, Aaron, because I don't want to start leaving people out.
So we have some from the Southeast Minnesota Arts Council. Some from the Southeast Minnesota Arts Council right now, and we have a couple into things like the Bush Foundation and a couple other locations right now as well.
Again, the issue is community services does not run on the funding that comes just from the state. The combination of levy aid that we get from the state is not enough to do the expansive program that we provide. But our community services division really steps forward and really thinks about what does this need to look like, what do we really need in our community, and they are very willing to make that happen. And even if it's something as simple as how do we support soccer to the point where they're ready to move to an activity? How do we offer an opportunity for a track shooting league that isn't really ready to be an activity, but it needs to be under the wing of community service to make it work? Obviously, all of those pieces have been facilitated. Also, as you know, over the last several years, we've struggled with the budget in community services. And a lot of that from the downturn in 2008, struggling with trying to really get a handle on how much new revenue we receive and how that should work. I think we really are in a good position with that and ended with a good positive fund balance at the end of last year, making a big difference. And finally, but obviously not least, last but not least, we served 85,000 children and adults accessed our district facilities during the 2012-13 year ago. So, pretty powerful testament to the fact that we have figured out how to open the doors and make sure that people have an opportunity to be in our district. If we look at human services or human resources and staff development, another big piece that happened here, and again, thanks to the willingness of folks like Val and Molly and Matt to really step forward, and Paul and Pam, we were able to really step forward and look at reorganizing HR and business services under a single director of administrative services mid-year. Again, not a typical strategy. Typically, that's something you try not to build the plane while you're flying it, but in this case, we had no choice with the departure of Stephanie to really think about how we could make this happen. And my sense, it has really been a positive for all of the things that we would call the back office of the district, all the things that we want to run transparently, but and if they don't run transparently, we hear about it in a big way. And the good thing is, we believe that we've put together a team that can really make this work. And so having that together, Again, we run under one director role, and then we have the directors of each of the areas that really provide specific expertise to move each of the parts forward, and we have a great team to make that happen. We've also, this last year, piloted the principal evaluation system, which we'll actually be finishing up over the course of the next month, and we'll be reporting back. We have been chosen as one of 2 districts to do the summary review by an outside evaluator to review the quality of the principal evaluation system. We've tried to give them a lot of feedback in terms of what worked and what didn't work well. And I think hopefully we have a better principal evaluation system across the state because of the work that's been done. Also, we began planning for the teacher evaluations change, which again does not occur until the 2014-15 year. But what already began in the spring of last year was bringing a group together to begin talking about those pieces. And that's moving along, I think, very, very smoothly in terms of thinking about what does that new piece need to look like, how is it going to work. And remember that the difference between this and the principal evaluation, we were just told you will have one. The teacher evaluation has to be jointly agreed to by the district and by the Teachers Association. And so we have, I think, worked very, very closely with them to really think about what that should look like. Also, at the beginning of the 2012-13 year, we completed the 2012-2014 negotiations with 15 of our groups, including several that are negotiated groups and others that are being conferred. Again, putting that all in place. And not only that, but also working through the process of modifying our health insurance so that we move to having everyone on the same health insurance pay plan. Again, a very, very positive piece. Lots of other districts are looking at us and saying, how in the world did you get that done? But again, I think it's because we have built a level of trust with folks. And I think in terms of what we did by bringing the bottom up and the top down, I think we really ended up creating a plan that people can get behind and be comfortable with. We're continuing our self-funded health insurance program, and over the course of this last year, we found that we're going to need to make increases in terms of the premiums for that plan. That's built into the negotiation process as we move forward. But again, we still believe we're saving significantly over what we would have run if we were operating on a traditional health insurance program. Obviously, working through human resources on the professional learning community, making sure that we have the training and support time that we need, and also enhancing the recruiting and retaining of staff, and really doing the planning to get ready to move to a 2-day new teacher in service this fall, as well as all of the work that was done around the implementation of the summer Tech Boot Camp, going to Tech Tuesdays, and doing all the other things that happened last year in terms of the weekly tech activities in every single building to help staff be ready for the implementation of Phase 2 this fall. In terms of technology, obviously, major celebration, the implementation of Phase 1, and approval of Phase 2 of the iPad technology transformation plan. Obviously, rolling out 300 plus iPads this first year to all of our teachers, making sure that we gave them significant time and training to get them prepared and to think about how they would implement it with their students, and then working and sharing with you and with the community all of the work that need to be done to prepare us to ask for your approval of Phase 2, which again we did this last spring, to really have that technology transformation plan poised to take off this fall. Obviously, the district wireless network, getting all of the upgrades there, making sure that we could handle the kind of traffic that we know we're going to be seeing as we see kids head to the building this next fall, and 1,250 iPads or more firing up and working at any one time. Also, technology training, as I shared before, the summer tech boot camp, school year training, excellent and really supported staff. We continue to massage our district web pages, really think about how we can upgrade those and continue to provide new information. I've used them a lot to basically share information about the iPad technology, about the calendar conversations, about other pieces, so that the website became the kind of the jumping off point for people to get more information about things that were going on in the district. And then the actual approval of the new 3-year technology plan. In terms of business services, facilities, and child nutrition, we again prioritized and completed projects on the 10-year capital plan. That's an ongoing piece. You get a chance to see that every spring. And again, the focus is rather than having items just come up kind of on an unplanned basis, we really try to look at those in a very objective and very focused way. We also did some major work in terms of the implementation of building security and staffing this year, and address not only the upgrades of buildings, but also providing the staffing we needed to make that happen during the second semester of the 2012-13 year, while we were doing the planning for actually implementing the technology that will let us not need to use as many staff as we go into the 2013-14 year for providing security approaches. We also implemented new meal patterns. Again, I don't know what you might be hearing at home about meal patterns. Again, Pam and her staff have done an outstanding job of, again, really trying to change the long-term focus in terms of the kinds of food that we provide, the nutritional value, but also maintaining good taste. Strong stewardship of the child nutrition budget, which is about us again this summer to do additional work in the kitchen area at the high school, really upgrade that just as we've done over the last several years each year. The Farm to School Initiative has been there. We used the SHIP grant last year, and if you remember, we also received the HUSSC Silver Award, Child Nutrition and Physical Activity Award at all 3 of our elementary buildings for this last year. In terms of budgets and funding, obviously, we really focused on maintaining the budget reductions that had already been put in place, looking to enhance our fund balance as we've shared with you and did. We maintained our current staff and programs despite the fact that we had the state funding shifts still in place, some shortfalls still in place, and underfunded mandates. We did a lot of work at the Capitol this year. I guess not only at the state Capitol, but also at the federal level, really focusing on providing testimony to the Senate and House and to the Education and Workforce Committee at the national level to talk about No Child Left Behind, to talk about the funding that was needed to address that and move that forward, and also funding needed to really address the situation here in the state where we had gone for a long, long time with very, very limited new resources and really no efforts to provide greater equalization. And obviously the work that I think we did, along with other districts across the state and Schools for Equity and Education, resulted in increased equalization funding for us, and that will have a very, very positive impact on our taxpayers in the fall, because we will be reducing the amount of the levies that come from property tax and increasing the amount that comes from state aid, and also providing at least the beginnings of a workable level of funding. Although I would reinforce to you 1.5% and 1.5% does not yet keep up with inflation. And so we're going to continue to have to work with those pieces. But lots of good efforts there. We also try to help stem the tide for too many unfunded mandates, but there are going to be some things that we're going to have to address as part of the fact that whenever the state gives a significant amount of new money to schools, there is the expectation that there are more things that you need to do to get that money. Also, we looked at the stewardship of operating capital and capital projects levies and creating a sustainable leasing strategy for phase 2 technology transformation. Again, we shared that with you in the spring, and that will be implemented as we move out over the course of the next couple of years. Finally, we again, because of the fact that we continue to use the contingency funding, we address class size issues, which are caused by lack of funding and choice programs, and also address Title I special education funding shortfalls that were originally caused by federal sequestration. However, you need to stay tuned because that is going to get worse. And I did meet with Representative Klein this morning with a small group of superintendents. We talked to him about the significant concern we have about the fact that ongoing additional 5% of cuts each year is going to begin to start really decimating school districts in terms of the funding that comes from the special, or from the federal level in terms of special education and other programs. So let's look at challenges. So first of all, as a board, I think as a board, we had a chance this summer to kick off a work session to talk about the achievement gaps in summer slide. We talked about some of the things that, at least for the near term, are not really physically possible, looking at maybe some kind of significant calendar change. We talked about what are the other things that might be in place. And we already have begun to work on the concepts of, are there strategies that we can do in terms of the summer programming to really change the way we address the needs of kids and try to get more of our students involved in the summer activities. Again, remember that we're operating with a fairly limited amount of funds there. And so obviously something that Aaron and I and others will be working on is, are there additional resources we can look toward? How might we use Accelerate Northfield and other groups to help provide additional volunteer support? Are there ways that we can expand the length of the program to provide a more meaningful impacting experience? How can we better link the RTI activities that occur during the school year with approaches in the summer? And we actually had some initial piloting of that because several of our RTI coaches this summer have taken upon themselves to actually bring to individuals who are working in the summer program, here's interventions for Billy or Johnny or Sarah or Sally. And you know, if you would work with this particular piece over the next 20-some days, we're going to have some additional impact on that student's ability to perform. And so, you know, I think we're beginning to see how those pieces might work. But a piece here that we're going to have to look at is that it still is only addressing about 240 to 250 kids. And we know that if we look at the number of kids in poverty in this district, the number is closer to 1,000. And so when we think about, are we really reaching everybody? We're not. And again, that was part of the discussion as we looked at the calendar, is the difference between a calendar approach and this type of an approach is that this has to be voluntary. This has to be something that draws people in and makes them be comfortable with the process, as opposed to something where everybody is involved. We're going to continue to work on that piece, and we'll be asking you to help think about what makes sense going forward. Again, as I mentioned before, we need to think about, are we ready to do a review of our district strategic plan? Are we ready to come back and modify that plan? If so, that's something the board needs to make a decision about. We need to continue to think about DPAC goals, and what we have to understand is the DPAC goals are going to be put on steroids going forward, because we're really going to begin to see the DPAC goals be tied into the World's Best Workforce Plan that's part of the new state statutes, because they will be an advisory group to the board and to the district, because they're made up of both staff and community members. The good thing is we have such a great relationship and history with that group, and I think taking that up to another level, I think it's a very doable thing over the course of next year. One of the key issues we've got as a challenge is we don't know what the state is going to do. We tried to put the folks at the Department of Ed kind of on the hot seat earlier this month and said, what are your plans? What is this going to look like? They don't have any idea yet. And what we really shared with them as we went forward is, we understand that you need to do this because it's statutory, but in the process, do not unravel a lot of really important work that school districts have done around professional learning communities, around RTI, and around building it from the ground up at the individual site level. My greatest fear is that we're going to see something where the plan is going to be forced down from the top, and the expectation is everybody will march to the orders of the plan, where I think what we have with a plan that's more of an umbrella, which allows us to grow the individual site plans and the individual PLC strategies from below, I think is the way to go. We think it's what really energizes staff to make this happen. And I'm very, very concerned that we don't see the state, because they don't have the manpower to do this right, creating something that's going to cause problems later on. Obviously, you're going to continue to do individual board policies. That's your job. Address those as they come up, and we'll continue to do that annual evaluation piece. Again, I'm really pleased with where Arcadia and Prairie Creek are, especially from where they were just a few years ago. I think with the two individuals that we have involved as directors in those two programs, they really understand the importance of accountability. They understand the importance of measuring performance and thinking about setting good goals. They struggle with it a little bit because, again, the nature of both of those programs as programs that are really around exploration and really around this project-based or approach to learning doesn't necessarily fit very well with the more stringent requirements of accountability. But I think they're making good progress, and I think they're looking at how they can adapt the pieces they have so that they can keep what they need and yet make sure that they fit under the umbrella that the state's provided. When we look at teaching and learning, you notice Mary's piece just keeps getting bigger. Now she's doing curriculum instruction, doing Title I and Title II and Title III, and also working on the ALC and at Longfellow. The piece that we looked at as we moved to the shared special education director and moving to that position with the shared director with Faribault is really focusing on putting all the pieces that are part of curriculum instruction together under one director's role. And so Mary will continue to do the things she's done with curriculum instruction RTI and really looking at the full measure of the title programming, including the traditional Title I program, the Title II, which is staff development, and the Title III, which is English learning. And because she's officed at the Longfellow building, she will be the Longfellow administrator, just as Gary was as the student services director, and also oversee the ALC under Daryl's direction. So it really puts kind of that building under her control, but I think she is more than up to the task. Again, I can't say enough about Mary's willingness to step forward and address pieces over the course of this last year, and I expect that to continue without missing a beat. Also be looking again at what other tweaks we can look at with the 9th grade academy and 10th grade seminar. We are continuing to train some additional folks on cognitive coaching, making sure that we have kind of everybody on the administrative team and a cross-section of teachers and other folks in the buildings who have that cognitive coaching approach. We again think that's a really powerful tool in terms of changing the way we interact with folks. We're looking at common planning, instruction support, flexible and cluster groups, and learning and intervention. Again, continuing those pieces and really looking at how do we bring those to the highest level of polish. Our Bridges program, Web and Link, will continue. Again, we're now ready to move the modified compañeros and ESL up in the 4th grade. And if you remember, ESL kindergarten this year is going to change again. We're going to have basically half of the ESL kindergarten taught in Spanish and half taught in English to really make sure that students who come out of that kindergarten and choose to go into the compañeros program will have the skills they need. The students that choose to go into contemporary will also have a basic level of English skills, so they will be ready in 1st grade in English. We'll continue to address class size and program choice. That's an ongoing issue for us. And it will be until we complete the work in terms of compañeros, and we have that done through 5th grade. We continue to have typically at least 1 or 2 sections where we have to use our contingency fund money to get that to happen. And we also are continuing to look at program choice pieces, because again, we try to provide the broadest variety of available course offerings, especially for middle school and high school. We are constantly having to make decisions about how do we get the most of the dollars we have. We'll be implementing another curriculum cycle. We'll be maintaining support for English learners and working through that process. We'll also be supporting from the curriculum side the SAMR technology model, and working with substitution as the initial phase and supporting teachers in that implementation from a curriculum perspective. And also a big part of what we're going to be doing is planning for all-day K for every student in the fall of 2014-15. In the assessment accountability, the core pieces we're going to be working on there are going to be looking at how do we respond to the state accountability statutes, communicating and collaborating with Northfield Promise to really look at career and college readiness, really put all those pieces together to have a plan that we have to have in place to meet the state's requirements, and make sure that we do that in a way that does not damage the high-quality programming we're providing for kids right now and for teachers. Our RTI coaches and classroom teachers this year will be fully implementing all the RTI pieces. We're doing universal screening actually during the Ready, Set, Go day tomorrow, so that all students, before they even start school, we will have identified the appropriate questions in both reading and mathematics, and we'll be prepared to do the problem solving and scientifically based Tier 1, 2, and 3 interventions. And the RTI coaches have worked very hard over the course of last year to get a repertoire of intervention strategies that are ready to go this year, and working with that process. And we're going to be thinking about how do we train not only teachers to implement those pieces, but how can we train Accelerate Northfield and other volunteers to be part of the process, so we broaden the number of adults that we have available. Also, we'll be implementing RTI and PBIS at the secondary level. Again, they've done initial training. Now they're actually going to begin to implement that process as we go forward into 2013-14. Also, we're looking at professional learning communities. That's, in my mind, is never or is not going to change as long as I am breathing, or maybe as long as I'm here. But obviously, PLCs, in terms of the focus on analyzing data, identifying students, implementing instructional strategies, that has been a powerful piece in this district. I talk to superintendents and folks from other districts constantly about, how did you do that? How are you making that work? How is your community feeling about that? Do they understand the importance of what's there? And again, being able to share now the kinds of things that PLCs have helped us to do, and the ongoing piece in terms of how well PLCs and RTI fit together, have really begun to put that into one solid piece, so that when we look at the school improvement plan, we look at the PLC efforts in terms of individual SMART goals and implementation, we look at RTI as we address if flexible grouping doesn't get us where we need to go for elementary, how do we use RTI interventions to make that happen? We also hope this year to transition to a focus really on evidence of practice to inform about PLC impact. I know how much you enjoy the monthly pieces on PLCs, but what we do know is it is a real drain on the group of individuals that is tasked with doing that in each individual building, even though they have to do it just once a year. And we're going to encourage the board to be comfortable with the idea that the EOP pieces at the end of first and second semester are the ways we take a look at how PLCs are doing, and we'll try to look at how we create a strategy that shares those at least twice a year, once at midterm and once at the end of the year, in terms of what's happening in each building. Also, we're going to be looking at increased test demands. As I said, we now will move to every test online, every test computer modified or adapted. No options really for paper and pencil. The really positive thing for that is that we're going to be moving to where the results will be coming back to us within just a few days. as opposed to right now, we're talking about data from those tests coming out tomorrow that were given in April. So that's going to have some, we believe, some really positive impact, but we also know that the state has had to continue to struggle with, can they make all the technology work? And can it work in every school district so that we don't have students that are mislabeled or misidentified in terms of their performance because the technology is getting in the way. In terms of special education, notice it's no longer student services, we're talking about special education now. We're going to be implementing that shared special education director. I've been meeting with Cheryl and Todd Sesker since actually June and then into July, and then on an ongoing basis every 2 weeks as we work to make sure that all the pieces of that move forward. The great thing is having Gary in transition role really has helped us to work that process through, but Cheryl is the Director of Special Education for our district, just as she is in Faribault. So we'll be working through all the kinks and bugs that are there, also going through a process of redesigning the assistant director's role and basically recruiting an assistant director who will start in 2014-15. We're going to continue that joint implementation. Again, that's been a very powerful approach. Significant reductions in costs because that's in place. We'll now implement mandated district-wide restricted procedures. We, I think, have some direction now from the state as to how that's going to go. And we now will be developing a joint student services handbook for Faribault and Northfield based on Northfield's student services handbook. And again, Gary and Cheryl will work very closely on that. But the idea is that by the time Gary leaves, at the end of December, that joint handbook will be in place and available online so that everything that happens in terms of major issues around special education, it's handled in exactly the same way here as it is there, so that again, we have very consistent structure. We'll also address potential district special education program relocation issues. Again, as you think about it, if we move toward 2014-15, we're now talking about all-day kindergarten for every student. We don't have the classrooms in every building to make that happen. And so what we will be looking at is thinking about what relocation may need to occur in terms of special education programming in order to make sure that we have space for all-day kindergarten for all the students. And at that point, remember, the only students who will be going half-day will be ones who choose to do so, and they will be coming into an all-day program but just staying for part of the day. So we need to get that in line and make sure we have all the pieces in place there. And again, we will need to continue to do training. All of those training pieces are, again, extremely important for us to be in good shape in terms of special education compliance and avoiding lawsuits. In terms of community services, again, the powerful continuation there is the Collective Impact Initiative, Northfield Promise, and again, Aaron and Zach and others are going to continue, I think, to drive that process as we go forward. Again, I think it has the potential to be a really powerful tool for this community to come together and think about what do we need to do for kids from cradle to career to ensure that every child has the opportunity to be successful, that every child has the adult caring, every child has the direction and support that they need to have. And really thinking about how do we draw together not only the people that traditionally have been involved in this process, but also to draw together people who traditionally kind of seen themselves as outside of this process. We'll also be expanding the reorganized model for early childhood. Again, as we talked a little bit earlier, the concept of saying, how do we really serve the most at-risk kids and their families in this district? What do we need to do with the PLUS program? What do we need to do with the Summer PLUS program? If this is going to be a vehicle to really help support reducing summer slide and help support that process, what does it need to look like? How is it going to be different? And what are we prepared to do as we go forward into the summer 2014 to make that happen. And then finally, it's the ongoing effort that Erin and her folks do in terms of grant funding for PLUS and school readiness programming. Makes a huge difference for us in terms of being able to provide opportunities for our kids. We'll also be implementing elements of what's called the community school model at Greenville Park. This is something that we've looked at over the course of last year. I looked at some models, especially in Brooklyn Center, the northern part of the Twin Cities, and really thinking about how can you provide more services in one location. And so we're thinking about how we can provide services in terms of preschool, how we can provide services in terms of county services and other pieces, so that the school becomes a one-stop shop for many of those things, as opposed to having someone have to go to Faribault and try to find those resources someplace else. And we're going to take some baby steps first, but we really think this has some really positive potential for us to really help support kids' needs and their families. We'll also be implementing security modifications at the NCRC, and Erin has kind of taken that challenge on because the city really had not thought too much about those issues, even though we have a number of young children, both at Three Rivers, Head Start program, and our program, and a number of senior citizens located in that building. There really had not been much discussion about how do we provide a secure environment. And so that'll be a piece that we'll be taking a look at in terms of how we can support that, especially as we're looking at the potential of having the NCRC move to a different strategy for how they are managed. And we've tried to work with the other partners there and with the city to help build a strategy for a different management system for the NCRC. And finally, again, maintaining balance of revenues and expenditures, because the one thing the community services knows that they live and die on is they got to get enough revenue to afford to do the things they want to do. And so if they're going to do more, they have to figure out where does that revenue come from. In terms of administrative services, HR and staff development, obviously completing the 2013-15 contract negotiation with teachers is high on the list. And again, we're pleased to be able to share that that's going to be a reality from our perspective at the later in this meeting this evening. We're going to be monitoring our self-funded insurance program. We continue to work with recruiting and retaining because we continue to have retirements, resignations, continue to need to be able to get new staff in place, and we really want to try to get the best and highest quality folks we can. We continue to massage job descriptions and rankings and evaluations. We will fully implement now the new teacher or the new principal evaluation plan, which is required in all districts across the state this fall. And we will be piloting the new teacher evaluation system in the third quarter of this year. So we're going to pilot it with a small number of teachers and our building principals so that we are comfortable and we have a plan that we can move forward with. That is a gigantic undertaking. If any of you have read anything about the teacher evaluation planning process and the amount of interactions and work that need to be done between the principal and each teacher, we're really trying to work on how can we do this and do it in a way that's going to be beneficial and is going to really provide quality feedback to our teaching staff. Again, we're working on the integration of HR and finance software and really trying to think about how to make that as transparent and as possible. And again, being under a single administrative services division, what I've really seen is the breakdown of what has in the past, in not necessarily negative ways, but just castles or silos that have been created because we have different entities, and now with all those entities tied together in a back office approach, I think we're really going to begin to see that roll together. And then finally, we need to be looking back again at the bullying task force. We are very sure that as we come into this session with no money and a short session, we're going to see the entire bullying statute come back up. And while we absolutely support the concept of bullying prevention and want to do everything we can do to make that happen, the initial piece that we looked at would bury us in paperwork. And again, unfortunately, just like the teacher evaluation system, there is no money to help make either of these pieces happen. So we're going to need to take a hard look at how we're going to do this as this begins to roll out as part of the session, which again this year does not start until late February. In terms of administrative services and technology, as Matt shared with you earlier tonight, we're implementing phase 2, the one-to-one iPad initiative for 612, the iPad pods for K through 5. Again, rolled out almost 2,000 iPads over the course of the last several weeks. Last few in the waning days, and the iPad pods have already been distributed to all the buildings and set up by, again, the building media specialists and media specialist support in terms of VAs to really put that together to have that ready to go for day one. We maintained expanded technology training and support, and again, we know we'll need to keep doing that as people are working on substitution and thinking about stretch beyond that. We're trying to continue to work on how do you maintain that other replacement cycle for the other pieces, and what are the pieces we need to continue to replace, and what things do we now need to step back from. We work with the web page pieces, and we need to continue our 3-year plan. In terms of facilities and child nutrition, again, we will come back to you this year with a prioritized set of projects. 10-year capital plan. We're going to continue to address building security projects. Already, over the course of the summer, we've completed the work in terms of Bridgewater. Middle school is just getting done. Northfield Park is done. Sibley is done, and within the first week of school, all of those systems will go online. The two buildings that we're still needing additional time will be this building, the high school, which will continue to have the staffing all day, every day through the main door, but the district doors being set up with a buzzer system. And then the Longfellow building, where we actually have to do some other construction, we'll actually be looking at moving to an elevated sidewalk that will move us from the street level up to the entrance level, and actually putting in a floor that will be up 18 inches higher than it is, and the doors will be up 18 inches higher than they are. So we have a flat entrance at which you'll walk in and have a broad, open foyer before you're able to go into the inside of the building. And so we'll be working with that process. That actually may be either later this winter or may even have to be next fall, or next summer, excuse me. And the core issue there has been that we've done some initial bidding on that process. The bids for the first time in now several years actually came in higher than we anticipated. And so we're trying to make some decisions about are there pieces of it we can do on our own to reduce the cost to make that go forward. You'll also notice as you've been in the middle school, you notice at the beginning, we aren't going to be the annex to the Humphrey Terminal, but it's going to feel kind of like that as you come in the new access doors that are off on the right. You'll see that there's an access door and a glass partition and wall that will take you up to the check-in window that will allow you to come in during the day. And otherwise, the other doors are going to be locked off. So we've really been able, I think, Paul and his crew really came up with a great strategy for making that happen. And I think they've come up with a great strategy for the Longfellow building going forward. We're going to continue to maintain those meal patterns, salads, fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, broccoli, those of you that are really into that, and Brussels sprouts, and reduced protein portions. Now we're also going to add to that the implementation of new meal patterns for breakfast, and that will be more healthy. And we're going to be trying to maintain that farm to school initiative, which has been so positive. In terms of budget and funding, basically we'll continue to work with that maintenance of a cash balance. You know how important that is. The budget reserve is required to make sure that we address any of the final pieces on the funding shift, maintain our staff programs again through the next 2 years, and to address any shortfalls or delays or any underfunded mandates that occur. Right now, as I said, the two underfunded mandates that are coming right at us. One is the teacher evaluation mandate. The other is the mandate around the programming for the world's best workforce. Also, we're going to be maintaining stewardship of the operating levy and capital projects levy. And again, we're going to be implementing that sustainable funding strategy for the phase 2 one-to-one high-tech technology. Finally, we'll be looking at class size issues and preparing for the title and special education federal funding shortfalls, which will increase by another 5% as we go forward. And again, in talking to Congressman Klein this morning, he sees no way out of that unless there is a grand bargain made that nobody seems to want to make right now. And so it's very likely we're going to see additional cuts in both title and special funding as we go forward. And that's a piece we're going to have to address because when those dollars go away, typically we have to make cuts in the match those. At a time we're trying to address meeting the needs of our highest kids. And that is it. So I would very much be very happy to answer questions you might have. I tried to watch Noel's eyes to see if they're glazed over yet. And so far not so he's looking good. But absolutely anything that you might want to ask about those pieces. Again, I am so pleased by the work that the staff of this district has done. I think if you look at the work that Matt, Mary, Gary, and other folks have done to really move this district forward, we've really addressed things in, I think, a good way. We looked at strategies to reduce costs and at the same time really enhance the quality of programming that we're doing and really think about how to do it even better. And that's a really good place to be right now. And again, I would say to you, and I don't think it would surprise you, but the number of folks that are coming to us saying, how did you do that? Can you share with me that piece? Can you share with me how you made that piece happen? And we're very willing to do that. But I think people do need to know that as a school district, we are seen as a leader in a number of these areas, which I think are going to carry us forward for the future. So thank you very much, and I would be happy to answer any questions you might have. Just don't make them too difficult, is what I would say.
Ann?
I have a comment.
Yes.
I want to thank you for being such a strong leader and facilitating all our staff that's done all this great stuff, all the, facing our challenges and getting our celebrations out. And you're thanking all of them while your leadership and your knowledge from all the work you do across the state has really helped us as a district. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
I see that all the time.
You're a great group to work with. And you guys are a great group to work with. I work now, and this is 33 years as a superintendent in 3 different states. This by far is, as a board, and including those board members that have come before you in this district, has been the most focused on education, the most committed to trying to do the best for kids. We don't always agree, but I think having worked in some districts where buses, buildings, and other things became much more important than the education of kids, it's really great to be in a district that really has that focus. So all good.
Rob?
I was noticing that a lot of the things that are celebrations from last year come back as challenges, and there's in a lot of places a one-to-one match for them. But one of the things that we celebrated is the community engagement strategies that didn't appear on the challenges, and I think that's something that we need to continue to do. And I think it probably is a good idea to start moving toward this strategic plan and start engaging the community in setting priorities and looking at strategies so that we're not talking about what's sort of a high stakes conversation on next year's calendar, but what are some long-term goals for the district that will improve the education for the students in this district.
And again, that would be my ask from the board, is to say, when we're ready to do that, we will we will take that piece on. Again, I've asked that specifically, I think for at least the last 3 or 4 years, because typically, 5-year strategic plan is usually a good length. And we've taken that 4 years farther. I think people were very, very thoughtful in terms of the development of the initial plan, in terms of making sure that we weren't trying to create a plan that was so prescriptive and so tight that it didn't let people come up with the best things that they could do moving forward. But I also think, again, things continue to change, and especially as we take a look at what kind of strategies we're going to use to try to address at-risk students, which is kind of the first element of the challenges that we identified for the board. That's a place where that ongoing community discussion has to occur, because what we've already found is there's some places that people are not comfortable with certain strategies for making that happen. And so we need to think about what are the strategies that are going to help us get there in a positive way.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, I think we also, if we talked about this, that we'd look at things like providing resources for enrichment. And one of the other challenges that was on the list was class size. And, if we have a discussion about what is the most effective place to put our resources and do some education around that, what's more effective, reducing class size or providing more services that are targeted for the students who need them. So I think, sort of an education and community discussion about those things, where should we put our resources?
And again, I think that's going to be an important piece going forward, because we do have limited resources. And so, I know there are people that would say to us, well, the best thing you could possibly do would just be to reduce class size. We know there's not a lot of research that says that unless you get the number below 15, that you really make a significant difference in terms of performance. And I think all of our building principles would say there's points at the elementary level at which it becomes very difficult to really support kids in a way that they need to be supported in. So again, that's what we try to use those contingency dollars over the last several years to try to help make that happen. But again, that gets at that piece, but it doesn't get at how do we support the at-risk populations that we have, especially if we're looking at the same time in sequestration dollars, cutting Title I and special education, which are some of the core ways that we have for trying to help meet the needs of those kids. So it is trying to balance and think about all those different pieces as we go forward. You bet.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Gary?
Does the sequestration, does the reduction of those monies for Title I reduce the amount of reporting and all of that needs to be done?
Nice try.
It's always a good question. No, there is no reduction in the amount of paperwork, no reduction in the amount of reporting that needs to be done. Right now, and again, the meeting we had with Representative Klein this morning, as you know, the House has already passed a bill, and it's a bill that I testified on when I was in Washington last May. That bill really does move a lot of the decision-making back to the state level, and really tries to focus on more kind of what we used to see originally in terms of federal funding, which was more a block grant approach of saying to the state, here's the number of dollars that you get. You need to think about what are the best ways to spread those dollars. And what we're seeing right now is the struggle going on at the federal level is, do we push those resources back towards the state and allow the state to make those decisions? Or because it's our money, do we need to have control over how our money is spent and how our money is reported? And right now, we're seeing the plan that's surfaced in the Senate is pretty much to keep all the components of No Child Left Behind in place, except the sanctions. And to keep all of the testing and all of the reporting and all of the other pieces in place, and to continue to do a lot with the waiver strategy and with a strategy for competitive grants. The problem we have with the competitive grants right now is the block size of the grants makes it almost impossible for any district other than a Los Angeles, a Chicago, a New York, a Dallas, or whatever to do them, because the grants are in the $4 to $10 million range. And they require a huge amount of work to create the application. I think we've been really fortunate in Minnesota that we were able to get at least one grant in terms of Race Top grant. But again, that was through some really hard work on the part of MDE to get that to happen. We're concerned that should you really continue to do a strategy that's competitive grants, when you aren't providing enough money to run the programs you've already approved. And when you're now funding special education at 14.9%, when you promised us in 1974 that you'd funded at 40% of the excess cost. And the actual amount of funding has gone down from a high back in about 2004-05, 19% back down to 14.5. We're not even close. And as you've heard me say before, we spend about $650 of every per pupil funding allotment goes to pay for special education programming. That's above and beyond what we get dollars to spend. And you know, we again, I think, reinforced with Representative Klein this morning. Maybe the best thing you could do at this point, if you can't get anything else done, is just fund special ed. You already have that operation in place. Just put an appropriation behind it that comes anywhere close to funding the actual cost. It would give us a lot of flexibility we don't have right now.
Any hope for that?
I don't think so. There are too many ways people want to spend the money, and it's not very glamorous. You know, funding something you've already told people you've done, even though you did it by making local districts and local states have to fund it, isn't very glamorous to put on your election brochure.
Thank you.
Other questions? Julie?
Well, I just think this is an amazing, amazing testament to the work funded by the district. And, you know, I like to talk about the fact that we're a progressive district with a laser focus on student achievement, and this really demonstrates that so well. And you alluded to the fact that challenges, we always want to do better, and we're always look to do better. And I think that, you know, that's something our district should be very proud of. This is just an amazing report, and we do realize the work and the effort that every little line item on this 6-page recap required from everybody in this district.
It's only 4.
Oh,
2 friends
it's an amazing list that took an amazing amount of work by so many people in this district to accomplish. It's absolutely amazing. So thank you.
Well, as you all know, the other big thing coming forward as we move actually into tomorrow will be the unembargoing of the state testing. And actually, Erin has already called and talked to me about that piece, because that information was provided to the newspapers and to local districts ahead of time. The key thing that I think you need to remember as you go forward is that we have a new language arts test, new English language arts test. It has nothing to do with the test we took before. It's a totally different set of standards. It's a totally different set of rigor. The test passages were much longer. They moved from fiction to nonfiction. And the level of the questions is much more significant. And what you're going to find is across the state of Minnesota, a significant drop in terms of scores. People need to remember that this is baseline data. you can't use previous year's data to make any comparisons in terms of what's going forward. The good thing is, again, in comparison to other districts across the state, we still are going to be in a strong position in every grade level, and in both reading and mathematics, as well as science. The other thing that I think is important is when you look at the AYP data, and you're going to be looking at how many fewer areas we have of subgroups that are not making adequate yearly progress. We've seen that drop dramatically. If we go back to just 3 or 4 years ago, in 2010, I believe we had 16 areas. We dropped to 12, we dropped to 9, and then to 6. And this year, coming up, we will only have one subgroup in one building that is making UIP. So, all good. But lots of work and lots of sweat and blood on the part of lots of teachers to make that happen. So just know that that's coming up. I am also going to be on NPR tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock to talk about testing and assessment. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I want to talk about what's good, but also about the fact that people need to be very careful not to try to use data from previous years in terms of English language arts, because this just is no comparison. We're now using the English language arts Common Core standards, the same ones that are being used across the country in the reading area, but we are not chosen to do math because our state believes their math standards are already higher than the Common Core.
I had one question. Yep. Okay, so my question is, you talked about in the celebration, Dr. Richardson, about the cluster grouping.
Yes.
And I know 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, we made the decision with cuts that we were going to have to do something different, the gifted programming. So I think we've had that clustering in place for 2 academic years. Right. And I know a year ago, you shared some of the challenges of trying to meet the needs of the gifted learners with clustering. And can you tell us a little bit about how that's...
Right now, again, what we're hearing from elementary principals is their feeling is that as we move forward, the flexible grouping piece is going to be a much more robust strategy for trying to have all students learning at their instructional level. And so I think their feeling is because they're going to be moving to 4 or 5 days and have moved to 4 or 5 days a week where they have flexible grouping in reading and or math. They're feeling that that's really the direction that needs to be the focus, and that while there will be an effort to continue to do clustering where it works and it's appropriate, that the flex grouping will be the core strategy for trying to meet those needs. And that's an important piece because the cluster grouping almost feels like it's on top of. We're trying to insert something on top of the strategy, and I think what we're finding is the flexible grouping has become such a robust approach to give us an ability to teach kids at different levels, and also an ability to pick up the kids on the other end and identify which kids are not working within the regular parameters of that grade level and really need to look at specific RTI interventions that I think in the long run it's going to benefit everybody.
Good.
Okay.
All right. Well, once again, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very pleased that you used narrow margins and included every bullet point, because I think it's important to recognize every bit.
As you can tell, I'm stretching it more and more. I didn't even leave a space now between the celebrations and Board of Education. It's jammed right underneath. So I either have to reduce the number of things or I have to go to smaller print. And I'm not sure I can read that.
Very good. All right. We are ready to move on to our next item for discussion report, which is I'm going to be presenting the performance appraisal summary
As you board members know, every year we go through a process where, as board members, we conduct a performance appraisal for the superintendent, and as the first piece, and then the second piece is that we look at setting salaries for contracts. So this is talking about that first piece, and I thought it would be helpful while everybody participates in the performance appraisal by completing their own review, and then as board chair, I've been summarizing these. I thought it would be useful for the board to have a summary report of everybody's input. So as you know, board members, we've used this Minnesota School Board Association, one of the forms that they have developed, we all use, and it gives us the 10 kind of themes. So we end up with subtopics rating Dr. Richardson across 49 different job responsibilities on a 1 to 5 scale, and then board members are very encouraged to provide additional comments. And so how I handle this is all 7 of us do the board reviews, and I take everybody's rankings and I provide them to Dr. Richardson as a mean, but I also look at that, being a data person, that a mean can
Mean is not just a mean.
that the average can mask differences. So I also mark pieces where we have a difference of more than 1. So if we went from 3 to 5, for example, those are flagged so that it's clear that there was a deviation of more than 1. And then also we always have an option to say you unable to answer. So board members have routinely put UA if there's an item that they just don't feel like they were visible to, and that's really important to count how many of those are included as well. And then I take all written comments and include that as well for Dr. Richardson. So this year, board members, we had an exceptional review of Dr. Richardson. 45 of the 49 items was an outstanding performance. 4 of the items were very good performance. So as I said, exceptional. Unlike what we got to see the celebration where we have absolutely everything, and many of these comments came through in the reviews from you board members. What I did is I took a few of the key items that many board members had commented on and summarized them here. So I'd just like to point out a few of those. One was the restructuring of the district administration, and board members recognized really how that empowered the key staff to take on greater leadership, and I think we really saw the fruits of Dr. Richardson's leadership in empowering his staff and seeing some of that take place. The shared position for Faribault schools is one of those items, and then just being able to really nimbly respond to the staffing changes that happened during this year. The other pieces are the RTI and the technology plan. Both were very ambitious, and we saw the initial implementation of RTI, and board members had commented just how that had exceeded their expectations in terms of what we heard about teacher adoption, what we heard about from the coaches, what we heard about in terms of the influence on student learning. I know some board members who had gone and seen some of the RTI in action, and that was really helpful to hear. And then the second phase was the transformative technology plan, and board members had commented on the thoroughness of the plan and in terms of the community involvement and the plan itself. And then the last piece were some of the strategies for engaging the community, and board members had talked about the different ways that had been implemented, and the one thing that really came through in board members' comments was the appreciation for this was an area where key staff took on leadership. So we saw Matt and Mary and other administrative people stepping in and taking a leadership role, and that was commented on by you as board members. And then also Dr. Richardson's response in communicating to the parents in the community after the Sandy Hook Elementary terrible event and the tragedy there, and how we as a district would be moving forward with our security plans. And board members had commented on that as well. So finally, all board members unanimously recognized Dr. Richardson's outstanding leadership in overseeing all financial operations and also empowering his leadership team in this area. So we had Matt and Val, taking on more and more of these pieces and really being pleased with it. Board members were really pleased with seeing how that was rolling out. And then the last item I just wanted to comment on was that there was one area that in particular, so I take all these comments and I give them to Dr. Richardson, and then I flag pieces where there was a disagreement. And one of the pieces that really came through as a board that we do not completely agree on is how that worked in terms of community engagement. And and I think it's important going forward that, that we know that some board members were very pleased with trying all of these new things and thinking that was working. Some board members felt like the community could be more engaged in the decision-making process. And then some board members had felt like we were extending ourselves more than we wanted to in terms of engaging the community and opening it up to having the community being too involved in decision-making. So as a board, there was really kind of three sort of themes that were coming up that were covering a range. And so I thought this is Dr. Richardson's performance review, and I thought it was important that we have an opportunity to hear what we all said. I thought it was also important as board members that we know that was one particular area where he isn't getting clear direction as a board, because we are not all, we try to learn new things, and we had different opinions on how they played out. So I wanted to give an opportunity for us to ask questions if you want, or of the review, or how I laid it out here, or anything. So, Carrie?
Well, I just want to thank you for doing this. I found it very, very helpful.
Oh, good.
I've been in your role where
Yes.
I've absorbed all of those
Yes.
pieces, but I really commend you for putting it together in this format and using it as a vehicle to also kind of educate the board on where we all are.
Mm-hmm.
So I really appreciate that.
All right.
Okay.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Richardson. It's no surprise when you hear the celebrations that board members recognize that as well. All right, we are ready to move on to our first item for individual action, which is the proposed 2013-2015 agreement with the Northfield Education Association. And Dr. Richardson, would you like to say a few words?
I would say a few words, but I'm sure if Matt has any other words, and he always has words, right? Of course. Again, I'm very pleased to bring forward the proposed 2013-15 agreement between the Northfield School District and the Northfield Education Association. We met on a number of occasions during the spring and summer. In working through this, my sense is that it was an opportunity for us to hear very clearly from the teaching staff the issues that they had and the potential language issues and potential issues in terms of salary and benefits that would be things that they would want us to look at. I think they were also very willing to listen to the concerns that we had and looking at the possible changes or modifications in language, and also the limitations that we had in terms of resources available. I guess I would commend obviously the members of the teachers negotiating team, because I think they were very thoughtful, very deliberate in the work that they did. I would also very much commend the team, and again, Matt, as our Director of Administrative Services, was our spokesperson for the district side in terms of having an excellent team with Molly and Val and Matt and I, and also those of you board members who participated. I think it's always important for the district, as we meet with staff, to have teachers feel as though they can speak directly to the board through you, and I think that has been very beneficial over the last several negotiation sessions. I think the final settlement that we have, again, I think puts us in a good position to move forward and to be able to fund it, but it also recognizes the fact that we need to be able to continue to recruit and retain high quality staff members, and the thing we can't do is allow that level of salary and benefits to drop low enough that it begins having people saying, I like being here, but I can't afford to be here. And I think we've made a good step with this particular settlement in trying to get us to that point. Matt, do you want to share anything else, or also, I guess, any core details about the final
Sure.
resolution?
Absolutely, and just as you have seen in the document that we provided to you, and also in the news release that we released with the board packet on Friday, it's a 2-year agreement, 1.5% base salary increase in year 1, a 3% base salary increase in year 2, a 4% increase in district contribution to health insurance in each year of the agreement. We really do feel that it's a reasonable settlement if you really think about it. This is the 3rd lowest settlement that we've had in the last 10 cycles for 20 years. And this comes on the heels, if you remember, just 2 short cycles ago, we settled with a 0% base increase in each year of that agreement. And the last agreement for the 11-13 year, a base salary of 1% base salary increase in each year of that agreement. So being the 3rd lowest settlement in the last, tentative settlement in the last 20 years, we think shows where we're still at with the economy. Yet it's reasonable, and as Dr. Richardson says, we have to, the core of the success of the celebrations that we talk tonight are our teaching staff. They are the folks on the front lines every day. We need to do everything that we can to retain the outstanding staff that we have, and when we do have an opening, to recruit the highest quality new individuals that we can. So I think that we feel it's a very reasonable piece in terms of moving forward. And I also just really think it's important that you read about many districts where there's some very contentious negotiations. And we're very fortunate, I think, that we have a level of trust where it really is a problem-solving session. Both sides, if you will, bring issues to the table. They're discussed in a vigorous yet very respectful way. We do not agree on everything, yet in the end we are, what I've been very impressed with since I've been here is the ability for each side, and I dislike that terminology, but it is what it is, to truly listen in a reflective fashion. And I think that our community should be proud of the professionalism that takes place at those tables, because it really is a reflection of our community in terms of those respectful, yet we don't always agree, but it isn't always a respectful discussion. So we are very pleased to move this forward, and we recommend that you approve the agreement.
All right, so board members, before we have any discussion, I guess I would ask, the superintendent's recommendation is to move to approve the 2013-2015 master agreement. So I'd like to have a motion and a second on the table.
I'd move it.
Moved by Noel, seconded by Carrie. All right, discussion. All right. No? Okay, well, I would thank Dr. Richardson and Matt for providing that nice summary. Having been at the table, I would agree with the comments that Matt made about how the negotiation process went, and I know Noel from many years of doing it would echo that.
Yep.
So. All right. And this can be a regular vote. So all those in favor of approving the 2013-2015 master agreement for the Northfield Education Association, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Very good.
And again, just to reflect that basically teachers began to vote today.
I actually think, Dr. Richardson, that it is probably the 28th is the first part of the road. They started some meetings today with their membership to explain that, because today's the first day back, obviously, of the new contract year. And so I know they started some meetings today, but their official votes will take place on both August 28th and September 3rd. I believe they're doing a vote over 2 days, just to make sure everyone has an opportunity to participate in that.
So because they wanted an opportunity to be able to present it once they had all of the staff back in place, and we felt that was very appropriate.
All right. We are ready to move on to items in consent grouping. Board members, I'll remind you that in the table file there were several items relating to personnel, as well as a gift agreement in support of the Science Olympiad again, which is wonderful to see. And I was going to just mention that was Multech Flexible Circuits again, supporting that, as well as the chamber memberships. So is there anything anyone wishes to pull from the consent grouping?
I would request to remove the chamber membership from there.
Okay, very good. We will move the chamber membership outside of the consent grouping. Is there a motion to approve the consent grouping without the chamber membership?
So moved.
Moved by Julie,
Second?
seconded by John. All those in favor of approving the consent grouping, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now we will have the proposed school district chamber membership as a separate item for individual action. Dr. Richardson, do you want to say a few words
Sure,
about that?
just a little bit about this. I have had an opportunity to meet with members of the chamber and also the chamber executive director in terms of trying to look at moving forward as a school district and participating in this community. In the past, we basically have only had either the superintendent or the community education director as individual chamber members. And yet, on multiple occasions, we've needed to talk to the chamber about things like funding, levy referendums, what we're looking at in terms of transportation, and we're talking about especially the transportation corridor along Division Street, and then I think most recently looking at the things that I think will come out of the Northfield Promise in terms of the cradle to career strategies, in terms of thinking about approaches for instruction that take us beyond what is college ready, and thinking about apprenticeship, looking at technical school approaches, whatever, and thinking about how the community can be involved and work with these pieces. And so we did, again, some research on kind of how we stand in comparison to the communities around us, determined that if we look at the school districts located in Austin and Eastern Carver, which would be Chanhassen and Chaska, Faribault, Farmington, Lakeville, Mankato, Owatonna, Red Wing, Rochester, Shakopee, Winona, and the Zumbro Education District, all of them belong to their local chambers as a school district. And obviously within our district, Carleton, St. Olaf, Northfield Hospital and Clinics, Laura Baker, Epic Enterprises, Three Links, Northfield Retirement Center are all chamber members. The other piece that as we discussed this was the concept of involvement of the school district in having a member on the chamber board, with the idea that again, as discussions are occurring around the future of this community and how education plays into that, having a voice at that table seems like that's a very reasonable approach to take. And I think at that point, I felt it was appropriate for us to at least consider the idea of moving towards having the school district as a district become a chamber member, which then eliminates individual memberships, but allows then potentially a board member to have a seat on the chamber board, and also to look at additional members of our district staff participating in chamber activities and chamber programs. So that's really the philosophy behind this. And again, thinking about how do we reach out to the community. This is an area probably where we don't have not really had a lot of involvement, although the chamber has been very kind in terms of listening to me when I came to them to talk about levies, etc., and asking my opinion about issues that are going on. It's not the same as being a member of the chamber, and so I think at this point that was the impetus behind looking at potentially moving towards a chamber membership as opposed to just individual memberships as we've had before.
All right. I guess before we have discussion on this item, I would ask for a motion in a second. So is there a motion? Moved by Noel to approve the proposed school district chamber membership. Seconded by Ann. All right. Questions? Comments?
I guess One of the things that I'd like to know from this is, how much of this money is, this increase in funding is directed to our local chamber, and how much of it goes upward to the Minnesota Chamber. And my understanding is that the local chamber is a member of the Minnesota Chamber, and so there's a lot of
Things that the Minnesota
there's a
Chamber
lot of
you might not agree with.
issues in there that may not be in keeping with school district interests.
Well, and again, that I don't have an answer in terms of what their fee is to belong to the state chamber. My experience in the Osseo district, where I actually was on the chamber board, I think for about 6 of the 8 or the 7 years I was there, although they belonged to the Minnesota Chamber, they routinely took positions that were not in alignment with the Minnesota Chamber, because the Minnesota Chamber is basically focused on potentially the 100 largest corporations in the state. And although I think they listen to the commentary and the information that's provided, my sense is local chambers tend to have quite a bit of autonomy in terms of decision making that they make. The most concrete example I can give you, John, is again when I was in Osseo and we were preparing to do a major operating levy, and the state chamber at that time was saying, no way, there should not be any additional operating levies occurring. Our chamber basically said, we hear what you're saying, but we believe that the operating levy for the district is important and meets the needs of our community, and so we're going to support it. We're not just going to stand idly by, we're going to actually put our name on it and say we're supporting the increase in this piece. So my sense is this chamber is very much the same fashion, is that most chambers tend to have a very local flavor and a much looser connection to the state. But if you need information in terms of specific, dues or fees that they pay to the Minnesota Chamber, I'm sure that we can get that information.
Other questions, Ann?
I have a comment. Chris mentioned a little bit about levy issues. And Julie, you can chime in with me on this if necessary. But during the levy campaigns, attention has been made to the Chamber of Commerce and our businesses and our homeowners, the ones who are ending up choosing to raise their taxes to support the schools. And I think that this is a good partnership, because the schools need our local businesses and our taxpayers, and we give back a high quality education system for the kids, and I see it as a really nice way to communicate with all the different kinds of businesses within our school district setting. So I think this is something to really consider.
I'm just wondering if you could say a little bit more about, the focus has been on how they can help if there's a levy issue, but about the supporting expanded educational opportunities in career and college readiness. What kind of specific ideas? Workforce development.
I think specifically in workforce development, the discussions I've had, they are very interested in having a voice in talking about what are the needs of businesses and corporations within the community, what kinds of skill sets are necessary. The fact that as a district, we need to make sure that we're reaching out and supporting not only those students who are looking at a 4-year college degree, but also those students who potentially a 2-year associate or a certificate program would be an effective way to getting a high-paying job or career going forward. And I think their feeling is that as a chamber, they would be able to bring people to the table to talk about what do we need as a community in a way that we haven't been able to get because we just really don't have the connection. Where at some times we are seen as being very, very much focused on a college, a 4-year college preparatory program, and yet we know we have students within our school community that would very much benefit from other kinds of programs. And I think these folks not only would look at helping to support that, but the other piece where we've begun to through our special education programming, looking at work experience strategies for special education students, the opportunity to do job shadowing and involvement of our students with potential careers that are available within the community, with having chamber members doing that connecting, I think has the potential of being a real benefit that we really haven't been able to address because we're not able to say we're in this with you together. And
So having that relationship would bring better access.
That would be my hope, yes. And I think it's a good link as we move forward with the Northfield Promise, because in that piece when we talk about cradle to career is a whole lot of other things other than just a 4-year college degree. And I think our ability to get our business community on board with thinking about the Northfield Promise, a big part of that is for them to see what's the potential benefit for the community, the workforce that stays within Northfield, the workforce that's looking for potentially good jobs, but jobs that aren't necessarily requiring 4-year or more degrees. And I think, we know already we've got at least 3 teachers that have some real focus on that within our building right now that oftentimes feel like they don't get as much support as they might get because, again, I think the business community, they need to reach out to them and try to, and hopefully this would give us some additional ways to make those connections with members of the business community that might have interest in shadowing or partnering or providing internships or other kinds of opportunities.
No?
I think it's a great grassroots synergism, an opportunity. Encourage it.
I guess I would follow up, Rob. I had talked to Rick Estenson, I don't know, maybe a year or two ago about how the school board could work more with the chamber, and I think what has come up, the 2 pieces that Dr. Richardson mentioned, that really with the workforce piece of this makes a lot of sense, is that at the state level, we've got some initiatives coming through at the state level for us to think about workforce, and then at Northfield Promise, that local initiative is really looking at how can we look at careers, and I think that this could be a nice way to have that sort of synergy at a local level. But I do hear you, John, and I think if we had concerns, I guess I see the local chamber from their past history as not being the same as the state Minnesota chamber. But there's an open question as to where the membership goes, but I'm looking at the small amount of the dollars. And I guess I'm thinking that the advantages outweigh if there's any sort of concern about that piece. So, any other comments or questions? Julie?
No, I absolutely agree that this is the right thing for our district to do. I think that it really solidifies, the partnership that we have, and we really don't have to look far to see the incredible support that we continually get from businesses, and I think this is a way that we can clearly demonstrate the importance of that partnership. So I plan to support it. So.
I appreciate John bringing up the discussion.
Mm-hmm.
It's important for us to have that discussion, and I think it's more valuable that we did.
Well, and again, my sense, John, and I've been on chamber boards in 3 different states, in various communities, all of which had a state chamber and local chambers. The connection between the state and local is very loose. And, you know, my sense is community chambers focus on issues in their community. And if they see education as an important part of the process, regardless of what the state chamber might say, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to follow lockstep. I just haven't seen that in at least 4 or 5 different communities where I've been involved with the chamber over the years. It just, they use the state chamber as information, but then they kind of saying that information in terms of how much do I really believe that? Does that really fit Northfield? Does that really fit what I know about how our school community operates? And knowing the leadership that we've seen on the chamber over the last several years, my sense is they're people that are pretty solid and think well about what needs to happen in our community.
Rod?
If this were to be approved and then brought back for renewal next year, could we have some sort of report on what the fruit has been of this partnership?
Well, I would expect, I guess I'll jump in, that we would end up having a board member very active on their board or in some sort of position like that. So, yes.
So my hope would be that board member then would also on a regular basis share information back from what they're hearing at the chamber level, and also the pieces where we're connecting, especially in terms of the cradle to career piece.
I think that's really important. Obviously.
Yeah, no, I think, and the obvious advantage here is if you go a year and you don't believe that we're getting what we need, this is not a lifetime commitment. Mm-hmm. But I do think it's the direction we need to go, and we need to think about, how do we make a stronger connection to the business community, because that is an area where while I don't think we have negativity, I think there's oftentimes a disconnect because there's not an opportunity for the educators in the community and the business people to really have those kinds of regular conversations.
If I could just also
John.
just say for a minute, I mean, what I guess the point I was raising is a concern that I've often heard in the community about chamber and chamber membership. I've been a chamber member myself, and am not at all impugning the integrity of the people on the chamber board or the current or past executive directors. I just thought this was a discussion worthy of having before we approve this without comment to the community.
Appreciate that.
Very good. All right. There's no other questions or comments? We have a motion and a second on the table to go with the superintendent's recommendation to approve the proposed school district chamber membership. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. All right. We are ready to move on to the item for information, which is the workshop schedule, a reminder.
And that's exactly what it is. It's just to let you see the variety of activities that are occurring in terms of staff workshops over, remember this year, the 4 days of workshop activity. And remembering that tomorrow, the big piece for our elementary staff will be the Ready, Set, Go day, in which all of the regular ed staff are going to be meeting individually with students and their parents, and all of the other staff are going to help support them in terms of completing assessments, doing other work, doing tours, doing other kinds of things, so that we're able to move through an entire classroom of students over the course of a single day. And again, this will replace the traditional open house that we used to have like on a Thursday evening. And I think Scott described it at one point as organized chaos, because you're typically trying in an hour or so to get everybody into everybody's classroom with typically brothers and sisters and siblings in tow, and mom and dad and the student that actually is going to be in that classroom. This is going to be a much more focused piece, and it also is going to be a piece that does for the first time what we've really not been able to do before, and that is to complete the initial screening in terms of reading and mathematics before they step in the door next Tuesday, so that we are really ready to begin reading instruction and mathematics instruction at their level the first day they start school. We think that's a really powerful piece. In terms of the secondary folks, again, they are working on PBIS and getting those pieces ready to go. They're also working on the departmental programming in terms of language arts and getting all of that moving. And we're also will be having some significant additional support of technology implementation during that block of time over the course of the 4 days. So again, one last shot for everybody who needs one more tune-up before they walk in next Tuesday morning and 2,000 faces with their iPads in hand are facing them. We think it's going to be an exciting time.
All right. Okay, good. All right, future meetings, board members. It's hard to believe given our temperatures outside, but we've got our September 9th and September 23rd board meetings are our next meetings. With that, I would ask for a motion for adjournment. Moved by Noel. Second. Seconded by Ann. All those in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye. 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 Opposed? Motion carries. The meeting is adjourned.